Hi, this is a brand new, actual brand new for you lecture video. This is because I already had a lecture video recorded for chapters 29 and 30, but we are going to also be missing chapter 28. So I am making a brand new video for you for chapter 28. So bear with me, it's very long. I'm going to condense as much as I can, like I tend to try to do. And then, I'll go off topic on a few things. So without further ado, let's get to the PowerPoint. So here we are. Chapter 28 is about the nervous systems. Don't think it's a surprise to anyone that a whole bunch of people are affected by depression every year. There's a lot of different reasons for this. And it's honestly one of my favorite things to cover in class, but not in class this week. So I have it for you here. Yeah, there you go. So for the introductions, it's just mentioning that there's antidepressants, which are drugs that treat people who have depression. And there have been a whole lot of reports about this. We are going to cover some of these, some of the good and some of the bad. But one of the things I always take a moment to point out is you'll meet various people who have different forms of depression, and you will meet different people who will swear up and down that the medicine works or it does not work. So one of the things I like to take a moment and address is that exact topic. Do antidepressants work? Yes, they do. The issue here is some people want a miracle and don't want to put in any effort. And so they want a pill that's just going to make everything disappear. If somebody is truly medically diagnosed with depression, and not just situational depression, but actual depression, what's happening is there's an oops going on in their brain, and it's not producing the proper chemicals that it needs. The medication helps adjust that chemical, the chemistry. It is no different than somebody who is diabetic and their body not producing insulin, having them take insulin. It's literally just adjusting a biological issue. Some people think depression just means you're sad. And so if you're on antidepressants, you should never be sad. Sad is just a normal emotion. It's going to happen. Where I said not just situational depression, if you have somebody die, you are clearly should be depressed. That's a very sad situation. Antidepressants are not going to help in that situation because that is not a chemical imbalance. That's actual feelings. The medication is for the chemical imbalance. Then on top of that, you have a lot of people who will not be honest with their physician about what they're consuming. A lot of things you consume can mess up the antidepressant medication. So if somebody is on antidepressants or antipsychotics or a whole bunch of other kinds of medications, and they smoke marijuana, that's counterproductive. Smoke cigarettes, nicotine, believe it or not, counterproductive. It can make some of these medicines not work. Alcohol is a natural depressant. So if you're taking antidepressant and then you drink alcohol, which is a depressant, that's countering your medication. Then you have certain medications, a lot of them are for anxiety, some are antipsychotics, some are antidepressants. A lot of them, if you look at the directions on them, it will tell you that you cannot consume grapefruit juice. And it's because there's a certain enzyme in the grapefruit juice that makes it where the medicine doesn't work. CBD has the exact same enzyme. I'm not saying CBD is bad, but if you are taking a medicine that says do not consume grapefruit, you can't consume anything with CBD either, because again, it will make it where that medicine does not work. A lot of times people self-medicate to try to make things better. And then if you're taking actual medication, your self-medicating is basically doing this, so then the medicine doesn't work. I have known enough people who have been on different medications to watch how it works how it works so well that people think they don't need it anymore, and then they stop taking it, and then they go down lower than they were before they started taking medicine. That isn't because the medicine did something to them, it's because the medicine was working, and then they quit taking it. And I tend to use the example of, if you're taking birth control pills so you don't get pregnant, they're working because you're not getting pregnant. You don't say, well, clearly I can't get pregnant, and then stop taking the birth control pills. Same thing with these medications. Yes, I know I went off on a tangent, but it's very important because depression and a lot of these mental illnesses are so misunderstood that I take a moment to cover that. So if you have questions, seriously, feel free to email me or talk to me next week in class. So here we go. Kind of already covered this whole thing. I totally should have had this slide on while I was talking. We've got our big ideas. Now we're going to talk about the nervous system structure and function. So I have something in the way here, so I'm going to move it so I can see better. There we go. Nervous systems receive sensory input, interpret it, and send out commands. That's literally your nervous system's job. It's going to take it in, figure it out, send it out, say what to do. So your endocrine system, slower, more sustained responses. Nervous system, faster, less sustained. So the endocrine system will throw something out there to try to adjust. So think the hormones and stuff like that. It's a chemical. It's something to, work. The nervous system, it's like poof, you touch something hot and you yank your arm back. You don't sit there and leave it on there and go, I do believe this is hot. What should I do? I think maybe I should slowly remove my hand. You don't do that. You touch something hot, you jerk away. Fast, not sustained. It's just immediate. I don't know why it didn't go forward. There we go. We have, and I talked about this this past week, I remember this. We have the central nervous system that is straight up down the center. That is your brain and the cord that goes all the way down. Your vertebrae are like this, and they have hole in the middle. I started to say holes, but it's one hole because that's what the cord goes through. Your vertebrae are there to support you and to protect the spinal cord, because this is your central nervous system. All information from everywhere in your body comes back to that cord and up to your brain, processes, shoots down, and shoots out. Your peripheral nervous system is on the periphery. That's the stuff on the edges. So not the center, everything that radiates out. That's the peripheral nervous system. This, nerves and ganglia. Just showing you an example. Here, I was about to say a bee, but mosquito bites you, your body feels it, and it makes you go like this, pretty much it. Knee-jerk reflex. Another one, they hit you underneath the knee and your knee pops up. The one that freaked me out, because the knee normally doesn't work for me, but I have really crappy knees. A doctor did it for my arm here one time. So weird. It just made it go plink. It was amazing, but that's what it is. You hit the tendon, which shoots the information, and then your body reacts. Okay, now the structure of your neurons are very specific. They have two extensions. One is the dendrites. Dendrites, highly branched, short extensions. These are receiving signals. So dendrites receive. Axons tend to be longer, and they transmit. So dendrites receive, axons pass on. Just a picture reminding you, dendrites receives the signals, axon transmits signals to other cells. And that's how it continues on. And then just some more pictures, take a look. At rest, the neuron's plasma membrane has an electrical voltage called the resting potential. So it's always like right here, positive charge, it's waiting. This is like, it's just kind of, imagine static. It's just waiting for the reaction. When I talked last week, it's hard to say last week because it was really just a couple of days ago while I'm making this, but when you watch this, it will be last week. I talked about the electricity in your body, and your brain is full of the electricity and stuff like that. And so that's pretty much what this comes down to. And yes, I'm oversimplifying it, but I do that for our non-majors class, right? Stimulus. Stimulus is something that got the attention. It's something that happened. It's something that's causing it to go. So stimulus alters the permeability of a portion of the membrane, allowing the ion to pass through, and that changes the voltage. So this is activating that electrical charge, basically. The nerve signal is also known as an action potential, and that's a massive change in the voltage. And so it's like a spike. Action potential, localized electrical event, self-propagated in a one-way chain reaction along an axon, and an all or none event. All or none, it means it fires or it does not. There is no in between. There is no maybe. It's poof, that kind of thing. The frequency of these changes with the strength of the stimulus. And remember, right here it says not their strength. It's because, remember, it is all or nothing. So it has nothing to do with strength. It's just how often. So this comes to your neurotransmitter. Neuro, pretty much your brain. So this is where it's putting all the info in your brain. And this is where it's processing and shipping it out. This is a little video. Feel free to watch it on the regular PowerPoint. I'm trying to keep this a little shorter, but it's really helpful. It comes straight from your textbook and it tells you how the synapses works. So I highly recommend it. It's right there. If you want to watch it, then do your under the either book PowerPoints or my PowerPoints, and then watch it in slideshow mode, and you can click on it and it plays. Okay, some neurotransmitters excite a receiving cell, others inhibit it. So again, your neurotransmitters brain, it's deciding which way it's going to go. It's either going to flip the switch or dim the switch. And that's what this is trying to talk about. I had a video somewhere that I remember thinking I was going to show you guys. I'm going to see if I can find it again and post it. It was really cool because it was showing the brain activity. It was showing it basically looking for other brain cells, other electrical impulses. It was pretty cool. More than 100 neurotransmitters serve as one-way ferries of information across chemical synapses. So basically, we have neurotransmitter releases this and makes it go. Norepinephrine is one that most people have heard of. This excites the neurotransmitter in the peripheral nervous system and then also functions as a hormone. Serotonin, another one a lot of people have heard of, supposed to help with levels. And dopamine, another one that people hopefully have heard of. A lot of people who are like really into exercise normally know that the exercise can adjust your dopamine levels. So these affect sleep, mood, attention, and learning. These are all super important. This all comes from here, from your brain. Okay, many psychoactive drugs, even common ones such as caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol, I mentioned most of these at the beginning of this, affect the action of neurotransmitters in the brain synapses. A lot of prescription drugs used to treat the psychological disorders alter the effects of the neurotransmitters. So it's basically trying to get the neurotransmitters to work properly. This is where at the whole beginning of this lecture, I said, about the chemistry of the brain, how it's a biological thing. Then there's other drugs like SSRIs that are used to treat depression by inhibiting the neurotransmitter where it says reuptake. It's basically trying to keep it calm. It's nice that I can actually drink water while talking. Yay. And you get to watch me talk without a mask. Yay. Anyway, what this means is where I said a moment ago about sometimes people are taking a medication and then they self-medicate and then they complain their medicine doesn't work. The drug is trying to help dim down some of these neurotransmitters. So like inhibiting transmitter. So it's trying to make it stay calm. And then you have somebody, I'll use bipolar as an example, who then craves caffeine, like a lot of coffee, energy drinks and stuff like that. In Bio 123, you had an assignment about energy drinks. The more of that you bring in, the more it's making this happen. And so it's counteracting the medication. It's not actually making you think better or faster. It's just making stuff fire quicker. And big difference between actually understanding and moving in a healthy fashion and just rapid fire. Just showing you how it works there, some pictures. Already talked about depression. So we're going to go a touch more into this one about publications. So in your book, there's a picture. We're going to have pictures in just a second. I think it just shows the same stuff here, where 74 clinical trials with antidepressants between 1987 and 2004 were done. Of these, the FDA deemed about half of them to be published or positive, and all of those except for one were published. So half of the 74 clinical trials were positive, and all but one of those were published. The remaining 36 studies were either negative or inconclusive, and only 3 that reported the negative findings were published. This is a problem. The science world, it should be everything is out there, so you're completely well informed. This can lead towards a bias to say, here you go, it all works. So here's the picture where it's saying that 74 clinical trials, 38 positive, 37 published, 36 negative or unclear, 3 published as negative, 11 of those published as positive. That is very, very disturbing. This is part of the problem. A lot of misinformation is out there. A lot of people don't understand. And one of the things I go on a lot about, a lot of the science stuff, is people will take something and try to simplify it, but they won't understand it as they simplify it. Then they oversimplify it, get it wrong, and then everybody goes back to that one source. That's why you need to never go by just that one. I know that's not just a depression thing, but that's a source thing. 2007, FDA established policies that required everything I just said. 2007, the FDA went, crap, that's not science. You need to do it all. And so now all of them have to be published. The statistical methods used to compile the results for the multiple studies, all of this is now included in the non-published data. All of it is found. This is so we can try to stop doing the only positive stuff. So this term, we start from the very basic and we move up to the more complex. And just like everything else, as we evolve, the nervous system gets more and more complex. So the really, really early ones have something called a nerve net. When we get to the bilateral symmetric animals, if you remember bilateral, you can split us in half. The 2 halves are the same. And so that would be bilateral. We have cephalization. That means stuff up in the head, and centralization, which means the central nervous system. So like us, the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. So nerve net, that's A. Then we got our little, started to get a little more complex, and wow, that train is loud. I'm assuming you can hear it. It makes it feel just like we're at GMC. Here, I'll help. There, feels more like it. Got that shaking going on. Anyway, the planarian, it's a little more complex than the nerve net. You can see it's bilateral. And so it's evening out. The leech, the annelids, they get a little more specialized, and the insect even more specialized. And then we get to the squid, which is even more specialized. And then of course you get to mammals and stuff, which is coming in a second, because now we're talking about the central nervous system. Again, the brain, which is our main thing, and the spinal cord that houses everything else. So this is all the stuff I've already talked about. Central nervous system, brain, spinal cord, peripheral nervous system, everything that radiates off of the central nervous system. Yeah, we're just going to scooch through this. Feel free to look back over it. So peripheral nervous system, we have the motor system that carries the signals from the central nervous system to the skeletal muscles. This is how, you know, we're able to move. And the, I want to do that phonetic thing and say autonomic, because auto is self, but there you go. That nervous system regulates the internal environment, controlling the smooth and cardiac muscles. Basically, this part is controlling everything that's not your skeletal system. Because if you remember, your skeletal muscles are the only voluntary ones you have. Everything else, involuntary. So the motor system controls the stuff for the skeletal muscles, the voluntary system. And the other, auto, self, that's all the stuff that is involuntary. And this is just, you know, a little table trying to show you that. The parasympathetic and sympathetic division, that's my favorite part to talk about. We'll get there in just a moment. Already covered this. Here we go. The part we don't control, I swear, I wish I could just make myself say these words. I just can't today, so sorry. So the parasympathetic division promotes all the internal responses we associate with a relaxed state. So this is what's known as the rest and digest. When you're just sitting there and you're chill, that's your parasympathetic division. Your sympathetic division is the jacked up part. That's the emergency. They say fight or flight. And I remind people there's a third one. There's fight, flight, and freeze. Freeze is when everything just kind of shuts down and you just, you know, think of a deer in the headlights. The reason that is a whole saying is it's like a deer in the headlights is because they freeze. Their system just turns off. So your sympathetic division is the part with emergencies. And I always said to remember it just by saying to have sympathy for somebody in this situation. So this one is not in your current textbook. This is from a previous text, actually from a different publisher even, but I like this one because it helps me. The parasympathetic side, this is where everything is working normal. Remember, parasympathetic is just your chill time, you're relaxed, everything's working good. You're breathing normal, your lungs work normal, your heart's just nice and typical, your eyes do what they're supposed to do. You can go to the bathroom if you need to, everything's just nice and normal. Sympathetic, you're jacked up with fear, anxiety, whatever. Pupils dilate, it's like your eyes are trying to grab all the information it possibly can. You get the dry mouth. Harder to breathe, this stuff, your heart's racing, your guts don't quite work. The story I normally use with this one is my kids. I knew this guy named Joe. He's the one who talked me into going to college. We were both mechanics, and his dad was former Air Force. Actually, I think he was still teaching pilots for the Air Force when we knew him. But he was no longer in service. He was civilian and still working for the Air Force. But he had done a few tours during the Vietnam War as a fighter pilot. And so my kids, God love them, they had questions. And their first question was about when you were flying a plane in a war, what did you do when you had to poop? And honestly, that had never crossed my mind, but that was really the big concern for my kids. And he said, you just don't, it doesn't even occur to you. You don't have to do any of that during that situation. And that's because his sympathetic division was jacked. I normally spend this moment to talk about people who have anxiety, like anxiety attacks, panic attacks, that kind of thing. When that's hitting, it's the sympathetic division that's getting jacked. That's why the heart, indigestion and stuff like that, it's because all of this isn't working quite right. And yeah, there you go. Okay. Vertebrate brain evolved by the enlargement and subdivision of the forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. So throughout evolutionary terms, when, I should say times, as we got more and more complex, the brain itself also got more and more complex. And so here we go. Embryo, when the baby is first developing, little bitty forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain. Because the hindbrain is pretty much the part that's keeping you alive. It's also where instinct, basically, ancestor instinct comes from. It's how a cat who has never been taught to climb a tree knows to climb a tree. If you've ever had a cat and you brought them in as a kitten, you showed them, well, you might have shown them the litter box. Most likely I sure as heck did, because I want to make sure they knew where they were supposed to go. But they figure out to cover their poop. And that's because they are not only a predator, they're also a prey item. They have to cover their poop to make sure that what wants to eat them doesn't find them. Bunny rabbits in the wild will poop on top of a log or something away from where they are, because they know not to leave evidence of where they live. All that comes from the hindbrain, which is pretty cool. Midbrain, another part of what keeps you functioning, but the forebrain is really tiny, as you see here, as an embryo at 1 month. But as the embryo is developing into, I'm supposed to say fetus, but I like to say baby. As you're getting into a soon to be born baby, that forebrain is seriously developing. Okay, now brain, so many parts of the brain. We are just going to kind of skim over the brain here, but cover a couple of basics like the thalamus and the hypothalamus. This is in the forebrain, big area. These are very important because these help regulate the functions that keep you balanced. It's going to be like temperature and stuff like that. Keeps track of the body position and the sensory information. So, your sight, your sound, that kind of stuff. All that is right there. This is a nifty little table, helps break it down. So if you've ever wanted to know what all these things do, there you go. And then breaking down again, the brain. We've got our forebrain, our midbrain, and our hindbrain. And then breaking it down to the left and the right hemispheres. And more major structures of the human brain. Now, less than 5 millimeters thick, the highly folded cerebral cortex accounts for about 80% of the total human brain mass. Sensory areas receive and process information from the senses. This is where it takes all the information and figures it out, sorts it out, and then tells your body what to do. There's areas of the brain specifically for each sensory area. I have another one. I don't remember if I have it officially marked, about 2 different spots that are specifically for language, which I think is cool. This I absolutely love. This shows you that different parts of the brain highlight with different parts of speech. So here they were filming somebody as they did stuff. They spoke to the person, and so the one that's hearing words, that shows what part of the brain lights up for hearing the words and identifying and basically figuring that part out. Seeing words, they would put words up there so the person had to read them and then process them. Speaking words, the person was actually speaking the words, and then generating words. Basically, they're asked something and then the person has to come up with what the word is. And you can see that much more of the brain works here. I find this fascinating because each one has a different part. For those people who don't really read, look at the part of the brain highlighting with seeing words. You do need to actually keep working that. I used to have another one, I need to find the picture, where it showed different areas of the brain lighting up for people who read versus people who don't, and people who read fiction versus people who read only nonfiction. The reading literally makes more of your brain work. Reading fiction actually helps even more areas, and the studies have proven that people who read fiction tend to be more empathetic and they understand more, I guess, from other people's views. I think it's super important. Anyway, so brain injuries. Brain injuries are huge. Traumatic brain injury is a real thing. I've made a lot of videos today, so my throat's starting to kill me. Anyway, this one, we're about to see a picture from Phineas Gage. 13-pound steel rod pierced his skull. They were able to remove it. How somebody can survive that, I don't know, but the body is amazing. They removed it. He survived, but everybody he knew basically talked about how much his personality changed, like in the negative, was more angry and stuff like that. So this is what he looks like after the fact, and the image with the orange pipe is basically showing you where the pipe had gone. So this is showing that it actually went through some of the forebrain and it altered some of his emotion, basically. A long time ago, they used to do something called frontal lobotomies, and they knew that a lot of decision making was here. And so when they thought somebody was being rash and making a lot of bad choices, a lot of bad decisions instead of psychotherapy, they really thought they could fix it by poking a hole and scrambling that part of the brain. I'm so glad they don't do that now, but fascinating thing to read about. This I love to include, and it's a hyperlink if you see. If you want to look at the whole thing, it's pretty fascinating. What's happening here is this person is a professional violinist. That is her passion. That is her job. They needed to conduct brain surgery to find out how to fix stuff. But considering how much happens in your brain, they need to make sure they're not mucking anything up. So she is conscious during her brain surgery. She is playing her violin while they are working on her. So then if suddenly she can't play it, they know they're touching the wrong spot in the brain. This way they can take care of what needs to be fixed in her brain, but not damage what she needs for this. There are so many videos of various artists having this done. It's absolutely terrifying and totally fascinating all at the same time. Okay, so scientists know now that the nervous system has the capacity to be remodeled, a lot of it being with the synapses. So we can strengthen or weaken in response to activity. This is your neuronal plasticity. So if anyone has ever told you, and I know I've said it before, your brain is a muscle, you need to exercise it. If you stop using your brain, it will deteriorate. This is why for a lot of senior centers and stuff, they have a lot of different brain activities. They have puzzles and word searches and crossword puzzles. They're trying to get the people to work their brain. This is to help strengthen the synapses to make your brain work better. If you have ever been sick and just laying there, just and you have barely moved, you just like lay on the bed or lay on the couch and just watch TV. You haven't read, you haven't really processed any thoughts. It starts getting harder to think. Your brain will only work as well as you train it to. Again, this is why I said a moment ago how important it is to read. If you're not reading, if you're not exercising your brain, you start to lose it. This is also why you have the people who constantly are taking courses, they're taking classes, they're always learning, they're reading, they're doing all this stuff, and they're like this. And then you've got another person over here who goes to work, comes home and watches TV. They don't read, they find it boring, and they just start to vegetate. And then over a period of time, that person, they might have been smart. It's not that they're dumb, but they stopped working their brain, and now it takes them longer to catch on to things. This is why it's important to make sure to be hitting all the areas of your brain. Practice with all the areas of your brain, because if you want to be the old person who's sharp as a tack, you want to be that person, you have to work out your brain. So, sleep's an issue. Sleep is insanely important. Sleep is something that the average American likes to sit there and tell you how much they don't. It's crazy. Used to describe it as your brain needs to do like a data dump. Your brain needs that moment to just kind of dump some stuff and set it in. So where it said restorative, that's what that is. While you're sleeping, it's giving your body time to reset. If you have ever crammed for a test just so you could pass the test, and then 2 days later you can't remember any, it's because by not going to sleep, you didn't give it time to filter down and become part of your memory easily. If you studied the night before a test and then got a good night's sleep, you will find you actually retain the information better, because this helps with your memory. So the limbic system, this is involved in your emotions and memory. Functional brain system, including various parts of the brain. Here's that thalamus and hypothalamus I talked about again. Central to behaviors such as nurturing infants and bonding emotionally to other people. The more somebody is disconnected in their mind, the less they're able to connect with another person. Again, when somebody keeps their brain active, they also tend to be a little more empathetic. If somebody is reading fiction and that helps them see how other people feel, it makes it easier for them to help care for other people as well. Now, the short-term and long-term memory, this is also associated with the sleep stuff and your entire brain. We know this. So short-term, literally in the name, it's a short-term memory. It's something really quick. It's just something because you need it right then. It doesn't become long-term memory until you have gone over it a few times and you've let it kind of settle. Short-term memory has temporary links in the hippocampus. When it goes from the hippocampus and then becomes long-term memory, these are going to be replaced by connections in the cerebral cortex itself. And it's not all in one location. This is why if somebody has traumatic brain injury or memory issues, it's normally not an entire block of time that disappears. It's random. And that's because your brain is setting the memories in various locations. Neurological disorders can distort one's perception of reality and affect a person's mood. Schizophrenia and bipolar is something I prefer to talk about in class because feedback is highly important. So I'm going to leave it there. And in class, if this is something that interests you, seriously bring it up. We will totally take time to cover this because schizophrenia and bipolar both are things that are so misunderstood. It's extremely important to really go in depth, but I need you to be able to ask questions so I understand that you understand, if that makes sense. So that would be a really good lecture assignment right there, is to tell you, to remind me. There you go. Deterioration of brain function due to a neuron injury and neuron death are the hallmarks in diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, chronic traumatic, oh my gosh, and we'll pretend I said it right, and stroke. So what happens in these is little parts of the brain die. Your brain cells do not regenerate. When you kill a brain cell, it's gone. That's just all there is to it. And everything on this slide can affect how your brain actually works. So here, MRI scan from a healthy patient and one with advanced Alzheimer's disease. So the advanced Alzheimer's disease is what they put in pink or red, whatever color you want to say that is. It shows that the brain just starts to basically shrink. It's atrophying, it's dying, and there's no way to fix it. There's a lot of research being done to try to help, but the best thing you can do is protect your brain now when you're young enough to try to keep as much of your brain as possible. As somebody gets older, their brain is going to atrophy. That's part of life. It's as things get old, they weaken. And so if you want to be the person who's old with a good brain, you need to be working it out now. These are hard ones. This is the one mentioned in your textbook. There's another one whose name I always forget. He was from the Patriots. Football. A lot of people out there like football. I happen to like football. I'm a Gronkowski fan. I worry about his head. What happens is over and over, getting smashed in the head is causing damage to the brain. You can't see it. It's just little alterations. A lot of these football players, people don't realize how much their brain has been affected until they just kind of go nuts and kill somebody and then die. And then they cut into their brain and look at it. So this example, Chris Henry, the top picture is a normal frontal cortex. That's what it's supposed to look like. If you look at Chris Henry's frontal cortex, you can tell it doesn't look anything alike. That is straight up just from getting bashed in the head over and over again. This is why a concussion is very serious. This is why you have to keep track of how many concussions. This is why in football, after a certain number of concussions, they're not allowed to play. It's not that they're being mean or picky. It's because you never 100% heal from a concussion. The concussion causes a tiny bit of damage. Each time you get another concussion, it builds on top of the previous. This can result in permanent brain damage. And again, you might not even notice it right off the bat until all of a sudden, looking back, you see all the warning signs. There's a hyperlink at the bottom that gives more information about that. All right. That is it. So now you should be able to do all of these things. And I'm glad that I was able to get this video done for you so you can actually, we can have covered chapter 28. I do beg of you, please, in class next week, remind me about that last part that I talked about so we can cover it in class and actually have a dialogue. I think it's extremely important. As for the lecture assignment, I think it is going to go with this one because this is the one we normally would have covered in class anyway. And so I think this is the important one. I'm not really sure. I want you to tell me something with the brain. I would love if you could talk to me about the depression stuff, what I talked about for the antidepressants, the medications, the sleep, the memory, or that last slide where I was talking about with schizophrenia, bipolar, and all of those things. I want to know, not word for word what I said, a recap, like what you think you heard from me about it. Again, not word for word. You say something like what I heard or what I thought or how I took it, and I want it in your words. And tell me what we should talk about in class on Monday about this topic. If you had questions, personal stories about it, I would love that, because then that's how we'll start class next week. Make sure to also watch the video at the end of the week 5, I had to remember what week it was, at the end of week 5 about the reason for the paper, because you should have written your paper about organ transplants or organ donation. And I have a video, a separate video that I've made previously, and I just decided to use it because I already have it. Why not use it? That explains why I actually assign this paper every term. So make sure you watch that. And if you watch that before this, cool. If not, I would suggest watch that before you do your lecture assignment, because you can throw some of that in there. And I've got a 2-for-1. I know you watched them both. So yeah, I guess that's it. I'll see you in class. Peace.